Therapists and psychiatrists of Reddit, what is the best, most uplifting recovery journey you've witnessed? Coming into this one late, but I work with children in social services as a trauma therapist teacher. So the shit I see is pretty horrific sometimes. I had a kid a few years ago who will stick with me forever. PTSD at 4 years old from seeing some really awful things that damn adults into lifetimes of isolation and depression. And my job was to try to get this kid equipped to handle a kindergarten classroom. A little info here: when young children experience trauma, one way they may communicate this is through mimicking their experiences. Sometimes in social interactions, sometimes in play. This child had this symptom. Essentially, I had a 4-year-old acting like a psychopathic, abusive, alcoholic grown man. Every day we documented the bruises and marks he left on me. For 2 years he bit, spat at, shat on, hit, kicked, and slapped me. Some days I felt like I was getting to him. Most days I went into the staff bathroom and either punched the paper towel dispenser, or went home and drank myself to sleep. He spat a used Band-Aid into my mouth. Threw his own shit into my eyes. Bit through my wrist, which, yeah, was all every bit as horrific as it sounds. But I kept trying. Everyone did. We loved him. We never let him know how stressed he made us or how much we had to brace and prepare ourselves for sessions with him. We never told him that we dreaded some days, knowing we were just too tired but had to do it all anyways. 5 days a week, intensive outpatient care, and it felt like we were getting nowhere. And that was it. He came to me that way, and he left me that way. The day he graduated the program I cried, got heavily drunk, and prayed his kindergarten teacher would show him half the love and grace I'd been able to. Only a few months into kindergarten that teacher reached out to me. We had an ROI from his IEP process, but I never thought I'd hear anything after school started. I usually don't. And she said he was doing amazing. The medication we hadn't seen work had started to balance things. The skills we taught over and over and over and over, he was using them. He had friends, where everyone had been scared of him before. He played with other children. He colored. He walked into school happy to be there and left happy to go home. She was describing to me a child I had never met, but had helped create. Working with littles is discouraging, because I often don't see the fruits of my labor. If I'm lucky, I can help identify ongoing traumas and put a stop to them so that the next specialist can treat it. If I'm even luckier, the child may be able to function in kindergarten better because of something I said or did correctly. But I usually don't know. If I'm unlucky, the grooming is so deep and so hurtful that the children give me very little to go off of, and I send them to school with little more than a lying parent and a wrist-thick binder of documentation that led nowhere. And my buddies on speed dial with CPS do their best, they do, but there's only so much we can do when a family really wants to hide something. I have to remind myself often that my job is really just to plant a seed of healing, and that I'm doing it for the functioning adult they will get to be someday, whom I will never meet. So that their middle school teachers never realize what a broken child they had to be at this time, and their future spouses and children benefit from the love they've learned and skills they've had mentored into them. But if it isn't hard some days. Most days. All of them. If it isn't so goddamn hard. I'm glad I do this, that all of us do. Social services is savage and unforgiving. We need more good people in it. I hope the kids I'm helping benefit and turn into the recovery journeys everyone here is describing, but unfortunately, I rarely ever really know. Edit to add, thank you all so much for the kind replies. It means a lot to me. You're all being so positive and uplifting. It means more than you know. What a way to start my morning by seeing all of those comments. Know that I'm no special person in any way. There's thousands of us doing what I do. We all have the means to make a difference, and we should all try to do so in whatever place we're planted. This is just where I do my work. You can promote change and growth whenever you do. No place is too insignificant. You're possibly one of the bravest of people. Therapists here. Withholding information for privacy reasons. Kids for me are really rewarding and inspiring to work with. One kid growled and yelled at me, wouldn't talk to me at all. Fought and stole from kids. He had severe trauma of all kinds at a really young age and wasn't given a chance. Refused to attend classes at school. By the end he did a complete 180. Not just because of counseling but also great support from the school. But his transformation was incredible. He went from yelling and growling out of anger to verbalizing hurt it stemmed from. It was truly amazing. One that stands out most was a woman who had used heroin, alcohol, and crack for all of her adult life. She was homeless, had never really held a job, and had multiple legal problems due to her drug use. At 50-something, she had decided to get clean and did so for several months, until her child was murdered. She had a brief relapse, but got clean again. In 4 years, she sorted out her legal issues, reconnected with her family, left her abusive partner, obtained her own housing, volunteered regularly, and completed a 4-year degree. I can't imagine having gone from a complete street lifestyle, enduring the worst tragedy one can imagine newly sober, and then entering and excelling in academia. Honestly, it's not the huge stories that stand out, it is little things that people accomplish during their recovery. A person meeting their grandchild for the first time because they've gotten clean. A person that always wanted to go to the circus but had never gone because money always went to drugs. A person finishing school or actually keeping a job. A person leaving an abusive relationship and excelling. A person finally reaching out to family and getting an answer back or kind words after years of broken promises. As many other therapists mentioned, we can't share many things because of confidentiality, but here's something I can share. Anytime a previously depressed, disinterested, apathetic, or suicidal client tells me about a new hobby or passion, I get so excited. Doesn't matter what it is. Dungeons and Dragons, pet rats, growing herbs, 3D printing, anime, video games, geocaching. I don't know about any of those things, but if my client is excited about it, I'm over the moon and I want to hear all about it. Seeing them find a passion for something, no matter if it's something that I personally find weird or boring, that's a part of my job that I love, and I will sit and listen and cheer them on, and I will leave that session feeling so happy. Had a client with chronic illnesses. She was often sick or in pain and felt terribly guilty for not being able to care for her family when she had really bad days. On the days when she felt good, she would push herself to her absolute limit by cooking and cleaning and fitting in as much family time as she could before she felt sick again. Inevitably, she would wake up the next day feeling way worse than she did previously because she overextended herself. This became a rather predictable cycle. It took months to convince her to slow down a little on the days she felt good and to take care of herself on those days too, so that her good days might last a little longer, and to stop feeling guilty for her bad days. She was able to find a balance and improve her overall quality of life. She did amazingly, and I still think about her from time to time. It's been 10 years, I hope she's still killing it. ETA, thank you everyone for the awards and comments, and thank you to everyone who shared their stories. To everyone who is recovering and doing well, I am so proud of you. To everyone still struggling, take care of yourselves, I'm rooting for you. This sounds an awful lot like my fiancée. She's currently in a self-referral mental health facility since she has become suicidal, to get some space to gather herself and to not be a burden to me, which she is not. I'd do anything for her. It makes me happy to know that people come back from this point. Edit, thanks everyone for the kind words, it's very much appreciated at a trying time. You're all beautiful people. Psychiatrist here. I used to do sessions at a government-run long-term psychiatric hospital. Where I am a patient can only stay in a psych hospital for 3 months max, and if they didn't get better we had to transfer them to the long-term hospital, so, the people who ended up here already had very poor prognoses to start off with, and to add to that they were all there on an involuntary basis, so cooperation was an ongoing battle. Very few are ever successfully discharged back into the community. There is a gross shortage of resources and the place itself looks pretty bleak, but we did all we could within our limited means. I have had a few successes with patients here over the years, which you kind of hold on to in order to remind yourself that there's always hope. One lady I recall had been admitted via the courts after vandalizing a colleague's car that she believed had been using witchcraft against her. After being admitted and treated at the regular psych hospital, She was diagnosed with treatment-resistant schizophrenia, which is probably one of the worst-case scenarios in psychiatry. Once she arrived at the long-term facility, I started treatment with probably the only drug we have for treatment-resistant schizophrenia. This drug is basically our last big bomb for schizophrenia, but is not a pleasant one to have to use with a patient. It has a lot of serious side effects, requires blood to be drawn every week for 18 weeks, and then monthly for the rest of the time you're on it, which is generally lifelong in schizophrenia, and most frustratingly there is no injectable formulation, so patients need to take it willingly every day, which is a real uphill battle for involuntary patients that lack of insight being part of schizophrenia as well, so you can imagine how challenging that can get. If they refuse more than 2 days worth of meds, the whole 18-week initial phase needs to be restarted from scratch. This patient was extremely paranoid and very hostile towards treatment in general. Every time I saw her she would get aggressive, argue with everything, and refuse the meds on several occasions, necessitating a restart every time. She was one of the most challenging patients I have had to deal with, and honestly I didn't hold out much hope for her. But, we just kept on trying, worked through every aggressive episode and tried to at least keep things steady enough so that she wouldn't deteriorate any further. After 2 years, things slowly started to change for her. She started taking the meds regularly and we had noted small incremental improvements. Despite this, her prognosis was still poor and I was just hoping to improve her overall level of functioning in any way I could. Then one day when she walked into my office, she looked like an entirely different person. Her grooming and self-care were definitely better, she had done her hair, wore earrings and actually smiled at me. All for the first time since being admitted to the hospital. To say I was thrilled at her progress would be an understatement, I was flabbergasted really. Having gone back to her almost normal self, she was a pleasant, articulate lady with a wicked sense of humor. After that, we did a lot of work on her insight and helping her make sense of what had happened to her and understanding the medications she would need to take for the rest of her life. After about 3 years, she was discharged home and resumed her previous occupation of being a high school teacher. Last I heard from her she was still doing well and even became a grandmother. Sadly, I no longer work at that hospital so I have since lost touch with her, but her story stays with me every time I see a hopeless case. It's the starfish analogy for me, and although my job can be emotionally draining and frustrating, every now and again you get to make a life-changing difference for someone, and that keeps me going. I started treatment with probably the only drug we have for treatment-resistant schizophrenia. This drug is basically our last big bomb for schizophrenia, but is not a pleasant one to have to use with a patient. It has a lot of serious side effects, requires blood to be drawn every week for 18 weeks, and then monthly for the rest of the time you're on it. I've seen some truly wonderful things from Clozaril, but yeah, it can be a pretty rough drug. I had a patient when I was brand new to mental health go from being absolutely unable to function to graduating from college, owning their own car, and having a stable apartment once they started the medication. My own wonderful childhood, but family history of mental illness. Diagnosed bipolar in 2004. I've gone through waves of being just stable enough to finish college and then spent my late 20s and early 30s turning to alcohol to manage my moods and escape from reality. Attempted suicide twice. Finally one day, I just decided I've had enough. I was already in therapy, but found a new amazing therapist and stopped drinking. Got my meds adjusted and you'll never guess, but my bipolar symptoms got much better when I wasn't getting blackout drunk anymore. I'm now married with a kid, have a good career, haven't had a drop off alcohol since 2015 and my depression and mood swings seem like they're a thing of the past. I sometimes feel bad about wasting about 6 or 7 years of my life, but it just makes me want to make up for lost time. Was working with a young boy who had experienced horrific trauma the first few years of his life. He was understandably angry all the time, but you could tell he didn't understand why. Oftentimes I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere with him. One day when it was time for him to leave, he hesitated between me and the person picking him up. We looked at each other like, what's happening? And he suddenly ran right at me and gave my legs the biggest hug. He then let go, smiled at me, and walked out like he felt okay for the first time. I don't know why, but that moment sticks out to me and probably always will. I work with veterans who have had traumatic brain injuries, a lot of whom additionally have some combination of PTSD, anxiety and depression. One of our most recent patients was a graduate student before deciding to enlist in 2011 to fight ISIS. He came back unable to walk and unable to read and remember things properly as a result of the damage to his brain. He could no longer focus in classes, and was severely depressed, which led to him not able to finish his PhD. We do an experimental 10 days brain stimulation treatment combined with vision and working memory therapy, and after his 10 days the changes were astounding. He feels motivated again. There was an improvement of almost 100% on every cognitive and executive function task, as well as improvements to his vision, reading, focusing ability. He signed up for classes at the community college here and is hopeful he can finish his PhD in geology and get his life back on track. I've never seen such a dramatic improvement before, and it made all the difference in the direction of his life. Reminds me why I do what I do. Thanks for watching till the end.